December 18, 1944. The Ardennes Forest, Belgium, 5:47 hours. Obergefreiter Klaus Müller pressed his frost-bitten face against the frozen earth, the metallic taste of fear sharp on his tongue. Through the pre-dawn fog, he could barely make out the silhouettes of his squad. 7 men of the 12th SS Panzer Division, moving through the snow-laden pines, with the confidence of veterans who had crushed the American reconnaissance group just hours before. The crunch of boots on crystallized snow echoed through the forest like breaking glass. Müller's squad leader raised his fist, signaling a halt. They had spotted movement ahead. American infantry, likely stragglers from the 14th Cavalry Group, they had overrun. What happened in the next 8 seconds would become a story Müller would tell for the rest of his life, a story his comrades would never live to contradict. The American soldier, a private from the 82nd Airborne Division, stepped from behind a shattered oak tree. No hurried bolt action, no frantic chambering of rounds, just a smooth mechanical rhythm that sounded like typewriter keys striking paper. 8 shots, 8 men down. The distinctive ping of an ejecting en-bloc clip rang through the morning air like a death knell. Müller, wounded but alive, watched his entire squad fall in the time it would have taken him to fire twice with his carabiner 98K. The Americans called it the M1 Garand. The Germans were about to learn why General George S. Patton had called it the greatest battle implement ever devised. In the autumn of 1918, as the Great War ground toward its bloody conclusion, military planners on both sides of the Atlantic recognized a fundamental truth. The bolt-action rifle, for all its accuracy and reliability, had reached the limits of its tactical effectiveness. The standard infantry rifle of every major army required a soldier to manually cycle a bolt mechanism after each shot, lift, pull back, push forward, press down, a process that consumed precious seconds and forced the rifleman to break his firing position. The British Lee Enfield, capable of 15 aimed shots per minute in expert hands, represented the pinnacle of bolt-action design. But even this remarkable weapon couldn't match the sustained firepower military theorists envisioned for modern warfare. The United States Army had fought World War I with approximately 2 million M1903 Springfield rifles, a bolt-action design that served admirably but offered no significant advantage over German Mauser or British Enfield rifles. When American Expeditionary Force Commander General John J. Pershing submitted his post-war recommendations, he emphasized the need for increased individual firepower. The enemy's use of automatic weapons caught us at a disadvantage, he wrote in his 1919 report. Future conflicts will be won by the side that can deliver sustained, accurate fire at the squad level. The challenge facing weapons designers was formidable. A semi-automatic rifle needed to harness the energy of the fired cartridge to automatically eject the spent case and chamber a fresh round, all while maintaining the accuracy and reliability soldiers expected. Previous attempts had failed spectacularly. The French Chauchat automatic rifle, issued during World War I, had earned a reputation as perhaps the worst military firearm ever mass-produced, with a failure rate that sometimes exceeded 50% in combat conditions. The Mexican Mondragon rifle, one of the first semi-automatic rifles to see military service, proved too complex and fragile for the rigors of trench warfare. Even the respected Browning automatic rifle, while effective, weighed 16 pounds fully loaded and served more as a light machine gun than an individual soldier's weapon. Throughout the 1920s, the U.S. Army Ordnance Department conducted trials with various semi-automatic designs. Each promising prototype seemed to fail under the harsh scrutiny of field testing. Some were too heavy, others jammed in mud or dust. Many wasted ammunition through excessive wear, or poor gas systems that caused critical components to fail after just a few hundred rounds. By 1930, the program had consumed over a decade of research and approximately $3 million, an astronomical sum during the Depression, with nothing to show but a warehouse full of rejected prototypes and a growing skepticism that a truly practical semi-automatic rifle could ever be manufactured in sufficient quantities to equip an army. The military establishment remained divided. Conservative officers argued that semi-automatic rifles would encourage soldiers to waste ammunition, transforming disciplined marksmen into spray-and-pray automatons. They pointed to the heavy ammunition expenditure of machine gun units and predicted logistical nightmares. Progressive theorists countered that modern warfare demanded greater volume of fire. The debate raged through military journals and staff meetings, with careers hanging in the balance. What none of them could have predicted was that a quiet Canadian-born engineer, working methodically in a Massachusetts armory, was about to revolutionize infantry combat forever. Jean Cantius Garand, who Americanized his name to John C. Garand, was born on January 1, 1888, on a farm near St. Remy, Quebec. After his mother's death in 1899, the family immigrated to Connecticut, where young John found work at age 12 as a bobbin boy in a textile mill. The tedious work taught him English and ignited a fascination with machinery. By 18, he had patented 2 inventions, a telescopic screw jack and an automatic bobbin winding machine. His path to firearms design began in 1909, when he joined the Brown & Sharp Precision Tool Company in Providence, Rhode Island, where he spent his lunch breaks practicing at Broadway shooting galleries. In 1919, following the conclusion of World War I, Garand secured a position with the United States Bureau of Standards, then transferred to the Springfield Armory in Massachusetts on November 4th, 1919. His assignment: develop a gas-operated semi-automatic rifle that could replace the venerable M1 Springfield. The specifications were daunting. The weapon needed to maintain accuracy at ranges exceeding 500 yards, function reliably in temperatures from 40 below zero to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, operate when caked with mud or sand, survive drops from heights of 6 feet onto concrete, and cost no more than $85 to manufacture, all while firing the powerful .30-06 Springfield cartridge that generated over 50,000 pounds per square inch of chamber pressure. Garand's solution employed elegant simplicity. His design used expanding gases from the fired cartridge tapped through a small port in the barrel approximately 10 inches from the muzzle to drive an operating rod that cycled the action. This gas-operated system proved far more reliable than earlier blowback or recoil-operated designs. The rifle fed from an 8-round on-block clip that inserted from the top, allowing ammunition to be loaded quickly while maintaining a streamlined profile without a protruding magazine. When the last round was fired, the clip automatically ejected with a distinctive metallic ping, and the bolt locked open, providing clear indication that the weapon needed reloading. The technical specifications were impressive for their era. The M1 Garand measured 43.5 inches in overall length, with a 24-inch barrel and a weight of 9.5 pounds unloaded, increasing to approximately 11.2 pounds, with a full clip, sling, and bayonet. The rifle achieved a muzzle velocity of 2,800 feet per second, and delivered 2,120 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle. In the hands of a trained soldier, it could fire 40 to 50 accurate shots per minute, nearly triple the rate of bolt-action rifles. The effective range was approximately 500 yards, though the weapon remained accurate at distances exceeding 1,000 yards with proper marksmanship. On August 3, 1933, the experimental designation T1E2 became the semi-automatic rifle caliber .30 M1. Field trials in 1934 revealed problems that required modifications, but on January 9, 1936, the United States Army officially adopted the M1 Garand as its standard infantry rifle. The first production model was successfully proof-fired, function-fired, and fired for accuracy on July 21, 1937. Initial production began at Springfield Armory in September 1937 at a rate of 10 rifles per day. Within 2 years, the factory was producing 100 rifles daily. By January 10, 1941, production had ramped to 600 rifles per day. At peak wartime production, Springfield Armory manufactured 1,300 M1 rifles per 8-hour shift, 164 rifles every hour, or nearly 3 rifles per minute. The industrial capacity that would ultimately decide World War II was beginning to stir. When Japanese aircraft struck Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, plunging America into World War II, the U.S. Army's Philippine Department found itself on the front lines of a war it wasn't fully prepared to fight. Among the defending forces, approximately 40,000 American and Filipino troops had been reinforced between August and November 1941 with shipments of modern equipment, including several thousand M1 Garand rifles. These weapons arrived mixed among stocks of M1903 Springfield rifles, creating a logistical puzzle as units scrambled to distribute and familiarize soldiers with the new semi-automatic design. On December 22, 1941, Japanese forces under Lieutenant General Masaharu Homma launched their main invasion at Lingayen Gulf. The American and Filipino defenders, vastly outnumbered and outgunned, conducted a fighting withdrawal toward the Bataan Peninsula. In the chaotic early engagements, the M1 Garand saw its first sustained combat in American hands. Technical Sergeant Michael Lawton of the 31st Infantry Regiment recorded in his journal, "The Japs came at us in waves, confident their Arisaka rifles and superior numbers would carry the day. Our boys with the new Garands cut them down like wheat. They kept coming, but they died faster than we could count them." The effectiveness of the M1 was immediately apparent and terrifying to those on the receiving end. Japanese soldiers, equipped with the bolt-action Type 38 and Type 99 Arisaka rifles that required manual cycling between each shot, found themselves at a devastating disadvantage. American soldiers could fire 8 rounds in rapid succession, maintaining their firing position and point of aim, while their Japanese counterparts managed perhaps 2 or 3 shots in the same span. After-action reports from captured Japanese documents revealed confusion and consternation. One company commander wrote, "The Americans possess automatic rifles in great numbers. Each soldier seems equipped with a machine gun. Our casualties from rifle fire exceed all expectations." General Douglas MacArthur, commanding U.S. forces in the Philippines, sent a detailed report to the Ordnance Department in March 1942, even as his forces were being compressed into the shrinking defensive perimeter of Bataan. Under combat conditions, the M1 rifle operated with no mechanical defects. When used in foxholes, it did not develop stoppages from dust or dirt. It has been in almost constant action for as much as a week without cleaning or lubrication. This endorsement carried particular weight. MacArthur was legendary for his exacting standards and his willingness to criticize equipment that failed his soldiers. The Bataan campaign, however, revealed a critical problem that nearly undermined the M1's effectiveness. U.S. Ordnance personnel, unfamiliar with the relatively new rifle, had shipped thousands of 5-round stripper clips designed for M1 3 Springfield rifles instead of the 8-round en-bloc clips required by the Garand. Soldiers found themselves in the surreal position of having to locate their ejected clips in the jungle undergrowth, clean them, and manually reload them 1 round at a time under fire, negating much of the rifle's tactical advantage. Private First Class Robert Levine of the 192nd Tank Battalion recalled, "We were digging through mud and leaves, trying to find those damn clips while the Japs were shooting at us. Some guys kept a few clips tied to their belts with wire, anything to make sure we wouldn't run out." The defense of Bataan finally collapsed on April 9, 1942, followed by Corregidor's surrender on May 6, 1942. Approximately 75,000 American and Filipino troops entered Japanese captivity, beginning the infamous Bataan Death March. But the combat reports from those desperate months had already reached Washington, and the verdict was clear. The M1 Garand performed superbly. As word spread through the Army, demand for the rifle intensified. Soldiers who had trained with M1 3 Springfields stateside clamored for the Garand. The race was on to equip American forces with what was rapidly becoming recognized as a war-winning weapon. Operation Torch, the Allied invasion of North Africa, began on November 8, 1942, with American forces landing at 3 points across Morocco and Algeria. The 1st Infantry Division, the famed Big Red One, came ashore equipped with a mix of M1 Garands and M1 1903 Springfields, with priority given to M1s for frontline rifle companies. These soldiers would be the first to test the Garand against German Wehrmacht troops, widely considered the finest soldiers in the world. The initial engagements revealed both the rifle's strengths and the troops' inexperience. At the Kasserine Pass, in February 1943, German forces under Field Marshal Erwin Rommel delivered a stinging defeat to American troops, inflicting approximately 6,500 casualties, including 300 killed. However, after-action reports indicated that American losses stemmed not from inadequate equipment, but from tactical inexperience and poor coordination. At the small unit level, American soldiers with M1 Garands consistently outshot German troops armed with Kar 98K bolt-action rifles. Lieutenant Paul Manning of the 1st Infantry Division wrote to his family, "When we stood our ground and fought them straight up, we won every time. The Garand gives us an edge. Jerry respects it. You can see it in how they maneuver. They know our riflemen can put out more lead than theirs can." As American forces regrouped under new leadership, Lieutenant General George S. Patton, taking command of the Second Corps, the combination of tactical improvements and superior individual firepower began to tell. At the Battle of El Guetar, on March 23, 1943, elements of the 1st Infantry Division defended against counterattacks by the 10th Panzer Division. Corporal James Henderson's squad, armed entirely with M1 Garands, held a critical roadblock against repeated German assaults. Henderson later reported, "We burned through ammunition like crazy, but the Jerries couldn't get close. Every time they tried to rush us, we'd drop half of them before they could work their bolts twice. after 3 tries, they stopped coming. The harsh desert environment provided perhaps the most severe test of the M1's reliability. Sand, the nemesis of all mechanical devices, infiltrated weapons despite soldiers' best efforts to protect them. The M1 Garand passed this test remarkably well. Its gas-operated system, while more complex than a simple bolt action, proved robust enough to function even when components were coated with abrasive grit. Soldiers learned to perform quick field maintenance, a practice that took mere seconds with the Garand's simple breakdown procedure. Private First Class Anthony Romano described his routine. Every morning and evening, I'd field strip my Garand, blow out the sand, wipe down the op rod, and reassemble. Took maybe 2 minutes. Then I knew she'd work when I needed her. By the time the North African campaign concluded with the surrender of Axis forces in Tunisia on May 13, 1943, approximately 275,000 German and Italian troops captured, the M1 Garand had earned its reputation. German intelligence reports captured after the war revealed enemy analysis of American equipment. One Wehrmacht assessment noted, "The American self-loading rifle M1 represents a significant advantage in firepower for the individual soldier. German infantry armed with Kar 98K rifles are at a marked disadvantage in firefights at ranges under 400 meters. Consider increasing allocation of STG-44 automatic rifles if available, or ensure machine gun support is consistently provided to counter American rifle superiority." The Allied invasion of Sicily began on July 10, 1943, with Operation Husky deploying 160,000 troops against Italian and German defenders. By this point, the U.S. Army had largely completed the transition to the M1 Garand, though some support units and newly arrived replacements still carried M1903 Springfields. The 82nd Airborne Division, conducting parachute drops behind enemy lines, carried M1 Garands partially disassembled in padded Griswold jump bags to protect them during landing. Sergeant O.B. Hill of the 508th Parachute Infantry Regiment recalled, "Landing with the Garand in the bag was a pain, but you got it assembled fast, and then you had the best rifle in the war. I chose the M1 over a Thompson or a carbine every single time. The range and hitting power made all the difference." The mountainous Italian terrain, where the Allies landed on September 3, 1943, tested the Garand in conditions drastically different from the North African deserts. Rain, snow, and mud characterized the Italian campaign. At Monte Cassino, where Allied forces conducted 4 separate assaults between January and May 1944, American soldiers discovered the M1's remarkable durability. Private Roy Matsumoto, a Japanese-American soldier serving with the 100th Infantry Battalion, described conditions. "We were wet for weeks at a time. Cold that went through your bones. My Garand stayed functional, even when I couldn't feel my fingers. I kept the bolt covered with a rag, cleaned it when I could, and it never failed me. Not once." The fighting in Italy produced numerous Medal of Honor recipients, and many of their citations specifically mentioned the effective use of the M1 Garand. On May 27, 1944, Private First Class John C. Squires of the 1st Armored Division's 15th Infantry Regiment engaged German forces near Padiglione, Italy. His citation reads, "Advancing alone ahead of his unit through intense enemy fire, Private First Class Squires positioned himself in an exposed location and, armed with his M1 rifle, systematically engaged enemy machine gun positions, killing 7 enemy soldiers and forcing the remainder to withdraw, enabling his company to advance. The sustained, accurate fire the M1 enabled was the difference between heroism and suicide. Supply of M1 rifles in the Mediterranean theater of operations took time to standardize. Many units weren't fully equipped with Garands until mid-1944, almost a year after landing in Sicily. The gradual transition created an interesting dynamic where soldiers could directly compare the new rifle to the old. Universally, they preferred the Garand. Sergeant William Jackson, who carried an M1903 Springfield through Sicily before receiving an M1 Garand before Anzio, stated simply, "Night and day. The Springfield was accurate, reliable, a beautiful rifle. But in combat, when you're scared and shooting fast and there's people trying to kill you, the Garand kept you alive. You could stay on target, keep firing, keep pressure on the enemy. With the Springfield, you had to break your cheek weld, work that bolt, get back on target. By then, Jerry's moved or shot you." By the time German forces in Italy surrendered on May 2, 1945, approximately 1 week before victory in Europe Day, American forces had suffered roughly 120,000 casualties in the Italian theater. The M1 Garand couldn't prevent those losses. No rifle could. But soldiers and commanders alike credited the weapon with providing a consistent tactical advantage that translated into saved American lives. As the focus shifted to preparations for invading France, the lessons learned in Italy's mountains informed training programs stateside. Every soldier shipping out to Europe now expected to carry an M1 Garand. The exceptions, men issued M1 carbines or other weapons, often traded or scrounged for Garands at the first opportunity. The pre-dawn hours of June 6, 1944, saw over 150,000 Allied troops begin Operation Overlord, the invasion of Nazi-occupied France. American forces, tasked with capturing Omaha Beach and Utah Beach, landed with M1 Garands as their primary infantry weapon. The 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions, hitting Omaha Beach, faced perhaps the most murderous resistance of the war. German defenders, positioned in concrete bunkers and fortified positions overlooking the beach, poured devastating fire onto the landing craft and the exposed soldiers struggling through surf and sand. In those first terrible hours, the M1 Garand proved its worth under the worst possible conditions. Soldiers landing in the water-wrapped rifles in Pilo film, a rubber-based protective covering developed by Goodyear to keep sand and salt water from fouling the mechanisms. Even so, many weapons were completely submerged. Technical Sergeant Raymond Buch of the 16th Infantry Regiment, 1st Division, described landing at Omaha Beach. "I went under with full gear, came up gasping, and my Garand was dripping. I cleared the water from the barrel, ejected the clip, checked that the action moved, reloaded, and started firing. Worked perfectly. I saw guys with weapons that wouldn't fire, but the Garands kept going." The ability to deliver sustained, accurate fire while advancing under fire proved critical. Captain John Fink's Company A, 116th Infantry Regiment, suffered 70% casualties crossing Omaha Beach, but survivors credited the Garand with enabling their eventual breakthrough. Private Harold Baumgarten, wounded 5 times during the landing, wrote years later, "The Garand could fire as fast as you could pull the trigger. When we finally got off that beach and started moving inland, we were putting down fire that kept the Germans' heads down. In those hedgerows, in close quarters, the semi-automatic fire made all the difference." The Norman bocage, ancient hedgerows, forming natural fortifications, created a nightmare tactical situation. Fields became individual battlegrounds, with German defenders positioned in thick vegetation that stopped bullets and concealed positions. Here, the M1's combination of power and rate of fire proved essential. The .30-06 cartridge could penetrate brush and light cover that stopped smaller calibers. Sergeant Kenneth Mackenzie of the 4th Infantry Division explained, "In the hedgerows, you couldn't always see the enemy, but you knew where they were. We'd pour fire into a position, 8 rounds as fast as we could pull the trigger, and that would either kill them or make them keep their heads down while we maneuvered. The guys with M1 carbines found out fast that the .30 carbine round didn't penetrate the brush. They traded for Garands whenever they could." Between D-Day and the breakout from the Normandy beachhead in late August, American forces suffered approximately 125,000 casualties, including 29,000 killed. German casualties exceeded 200,000, including approximately 80,000 killed and 200,000 captured. The disparity partly resulted from the Allies' overwhelming material superiority, but at the small unit level, the tactical advantage provided by the M1 Garand contributed significantly. By late summer 1944, many NCOs and field officers who had been issued M1 carbines, lighter and easier to carry but firing a less powerful cartridge, actively traded for Garands. The .30-06 cartridge's ability to blast through doors, masonry, and heavy cover proved essential in urban combat and hedgerow fighting. At 5:30 hours on December 16, 1944, German forces launched Operation Wacht am Rhein, what would become known to the Allies as the Battle of the Bulge. More than 200,000 German troops and nearly 1,000 tanks struck along an 80-mile front in the Ardennes Forest, catching American forces by surprise. The 14th Cavalry Group, equipped with M1 Garands and light vehicles, ran headlong into SS Kampfgruppe Hansen's armored spearhead. Overwhelmed by panzer tanks and superior numbers, the cavalry group suffered severe casualties. But even in defeat, the M1 demonstrated its value. Lieutenant Eric Wood of the 589th Field Artillery Battalion found himself cut off with a small group of soldiers behind German lines near Meyer Road, Belgium. For 9 days, Wood's group conducted guerrilla operations against German supply lines, using their M1 Garands to deadly effect. German reports captured after the war described a mysterious American sniper, armed with a rapid-firing rifle, who killed at least 24 German soldiers before being hunted down and killed on December 24, 1944. Wood was posthumously awarded the Silver Star, and his actions demonstrated how the M1 transformed individual soldiers into force multipliers. The defense of Bastogne became perhaps the most famous action of the battle. The 101st Airborne Division rushed into the town to hold the critical crossroads, faced encirclement by German forces. Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe's famous reply of "nuts" to German surrender demands became legendary, but it was soldiers like Private First Class Richard Winters, future of Band of Brothers fame, and thousands of others armed with M1 Garands who made that defiance meaningful. Sergeant Donald Burgett of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment wrote, "At Bastogne, we were firing constantly. The Garand never let us down. 20 below zero, fingers so cold you could barely feel the trigger, but the rifles worked. We'd fire until the barrel was hot enough to melt snow, reload, and keep firing. Jerry tried to overrun us again and again, and we killed them by the hundreds." The weather conditions, temperatures dropping to -20 degrees Fahrenheit, constant snow, limited visibility, tested every piece of equipment. The M1 Garand proved remarkably cold resistant. Unlike some weapons that became sluggish or failed in extreme cold, the Garand's gas system and simple design continued to function. Soldiers learned to keep their rifles covered with fabric to prevent snow from entering the action. But even when snow did infiltrate, the weapon typically continued to operate. Technical Sergeant James Story, conducting patrols near Lellig, Luxembourg, in late December, noted, "The Garand was the one thing we could count on. Everything else froze, rations, radios, vehicle engines, but the rifles kept working. We'd thaw our hands on the barrel after firing. That warmth might have saved some fingers from frostbite." By January 25, 1945, when the Bulge was finally eliminated and German forces pushed back to their starting positions, American forces had suffered approximately 89,500 casualties, including 19,000 killed. German losses exceeded 100,000, including approximately 800 tanks and thousands of irreplaceable vehicles destroyed. The Wehrmacht had gambled everything on one last offensive and lost. Among the thousands of after-action reports filed in the battle's aftermath, a consistent theme emerged. The M1 Garand's reliability under the worst possible conditions had been absolute. Lieutenant General George S. Patton, whose Third Army had executed a remarkable 90-degree pivot to relieve Bastogne, sent a report to the Ordnance Department on January 26, 1945. "In my opinion, the M1 rifle is the greatest battle implement ever devised." While European battlefields tested the M1 Garand in one set of extreme conditions, the Pacific theater presented entirely different challenges. The first major American offensive began on August 7, 1942, when the 1st Marine Division landed on Guadalcanal. The Marines arrived equipped with a mix of weapons, but many still carried M1903 Springfield rifles. Combat in the dense jungle quickly demonstrated the value of rapid-firing weapons, and M1 Garands became highly prized. The Japanese Type 38 and Type 99 Arisaka rifles, bolt-action designs, put their users at the same disadvantage German soldiers faced in Europe. Gunnery Sergeant John Bastogne, who would earn the Medal of Honor for his actions on Guadalcanal in October 1942, wielded a machine gun during his famous defensive action, but he had trained extensively with the M1 Garand. His after-action comments reflected the view of many Marines. The Garand would have made things easier. 8 rounds, semi-auto, good power. In the jungle, when you can't see more than 50 feet, and the Japs are coming at you, that rate of fire matters. By 1943, Marine Corps units were receiving increasing numbers of M1 Garands, though the Marines characteristically resisted giving up their beloved M1903 Springfields. The rifle's performance at Tarawa in November 1943 helped change minds. On that tiny coral atoll, where nearly 1,000 Marines died in 76 hours of savage fighting, the ability to deliver rapid, accurate fire from cover proved essential. Private First Class Robert Lane of the 2nd Marine Division recorded, "The Japs would infiltrate at night, try to get close for Banzai charges. With the Garand, you could put rounds on target fast, really fast. You didn't have to think about working a bolt. Just aim, fire, aim, fire. It saved lives." The Battle of Saipan in June or July 1944 saw the M1 Garand face perhaps its most severe test in Pacific combat. Japanese forces, fighting from caves and fortified positions, conducted massive Banzai charges. On July 7, 1944, approximately 3,000 Japanese soldiers launched the largest Banzai charge of the Pacific War against American positions. U.S. soldiers and Marines, many armed with M1 Garands, poured devastating fire into the charging masses. Sergeant David Owens of the 105th Infantry Regiment, 27th Infantry Division, described the action. They came screaming out of the darkness. Thousands of them. We fired until our barrels glowed. I went through maybe 10 clips, 80 rounds, in what felt like minutes. The Garand never jammed, never stopped. The Japs got close. Some made it into our positions, but we killed them by the hundreds. Without that rate of fire, they would have overrun us. The war ended with the Japanese surrender on August 15, 1945. Approximately 5.4 million M1 Garands had been manufactured during the war years, equipping every branch of the United States military. The rifle had been fired in combat from the Arctic to the equator, from sea level to mountain peaks over 10,000 feet, in temperatures ranging from -40 to positive 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Its reliability rate exceeded all expectations, and its combat effectiveness transformed infantry tactics. The war's statistical summary told part of the story. American forces had fought enemies that outnumbered them, in conditions that ranged from terrible to apocalyptic, and had prevailed. The M1 Garand wasn't the only reason for victory. Industrial capacity, air superiority, and naval dominance all played crucial roles. But at the individual level, the level where young men with rifles fought and died, the Garand provided an advantage that consistently proved decisive. The industrial achievement behind the M1 Garand's production deserves recognition alongside its combat performance. When Springfield Armory began manufacturing the rifle in September 1937 at a rate of 10 per day, few imagined the scale of production that would follow. By 1940, with war clouds gathering, production had reached 100 per day. Following Pearl Harbor, Springfield Armory transformed into a precision warfare factory operating around the clock. At peak production in 1944, the facility manufactured 300 completed rifles per 8-hour shift. That's 164 rifles per hour, 2.7 rifles per minute, or one complete, combat-ready M1 Garand, approximately every 22 seconds. This production miracle required fundamental changes to American manufacturing. Women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers, comprising 43% of Springfield Armory's workforce by 1944. The women's ordnance workers, nicknamed WOWs, performed every aspect of M1 production, from heavy forging operations to delicate stock fitting. Their contributions extended beyond simply replacing men who had gone to war. They often improved production processes, identifying inefficiencies, and implementing solutions. Rosie the Riveter wasn't just a propaganda poster. She was forging barrel assemblies and testing firing pins at Springfield Armory. John Garand himself contributed far beyond his initial rifle design. As chief engineer at Springfield Armory, earning $8,000 annually by 1942, equivalent to approximately $160,000 in 2024 dollars, he revolutionized production methodologies. He redesigned chamber honing processes, reducing production time while improving quality. He invented numerous gauges and tools that streamlined manufacturing. Perhaps most remarkably, he never received royalties for any of his inventions, having transferred all rights to the U.S. government on January 20th, 1936. A bill introduced in Congress to award him $100,000 in appreciation failed to pass. He received honors instead, the Meritorious Civilian Service Award in 1941, and on March 28, 1944, he became one of the first two recipients of the Medal for Merit, sharing that distinction with radar pioneer Albert Hoyt Taylor. The economic impact extended beyond Springfield Armory. Winchester Repeating Arms Company received contracts to manufacture M1 Garands in 1940, eventually producing over 500,000 rifles. During the Korean War, when production resumed in 1952, International Harvester Corporation and Harrington and Richardson Arms received contracts manufacturing almost 1.5 million additional rifles through 1957. The M1's production created employment across New England during the Depression years when work was scarce. One contemporary citation for Garand's 1939 Pynchon Medal specifically noted, "The production of this rifle has substantially relieved unemployment in Springfield and nearby cities. A commercial organization's production in New Haven will also create considerable employment." The psychological impact on enemy forces shouldn't be underestimated. German, Italian, and Japanese soldiers consistently reported surprise and dismay at American firepower. One captured German officer's interrogation transcript revealed, "We were told the Americans were poorly trained civilians, not real soldiers like us. Then we fought them. Their individual firepower was devastating. Every rifleman fired like he had an automatic weapon. Our tactics, developed on the Eastern Front against Russians with bolt-action rifles, didn't work. We had to adapt, to change how we fought, because we couldn't match their fire volume." This admission reveals a crucial strategic dimension. The Wehrmacht, fighting a multi-front war against enemies who were also equipped primarily with bolt-action rifles, had developed tactics optimized for that battlefield reality. The Eastern Front, where German forces fought Soviet troops, armed with Mosin Nagant bolt-action rifles, though the Soviets also issued semi-automatic Tokarev SVT-40 rifles in limited numbers, had shaped German infantry doctrine. When American forces equipped with M1 Garands entered combat, German tactics suddenly proved inadequate. The Wehrmacht responded by increasing distribution of machine guns and developing the STG-44 assault rifle, the world's first true assault rifle, but these measures came too late and in insufficient numbers to alter the war's outcome. The cultural impact emerged gradually. The distinctive ping of the M1's ejecting clip became an iconic sound, featured in countless films and television shows. Veterans organizations preserved and cherished M1 rifles as symbols of their service. The rifle's simple elegance, walnut stock, clean lines, mechanical reliability, embodied American pragmatism and industrial capability. It wasn't the most beautiful rifle ever made. The M1903 Springfield and the Lee Enfield had more refined craftsmanship. But the Garand worked reliably, and worked when lives depended on it. That functionality became a source of pride. The technological legacy extended far beyond the rifle itself. The M1's gas-operated system influenced post-war rifle design worldwide. When the U.S. military developed the M14 rifle in the 1950s, it essentially represented an evolved M1 Garand with a detachable magazine and selective fire capability. The M14's civilian semi-automatic variant, the M1A, continues production today, carrying the Garand's DNA into the 21st century. Nations around the world studied the Garand, copying its features or developing alternatives to match its capabilities. The diplomatic dimension deserves mention. After World War II, the United States provided M1 Garands to Allied nations through military assistance programs. Former Axis powers, including West Germany, Italy, and Japan, received thousands of Garands to equip their new defense forces during the Cold War. The rifle that had defeated them in combat became their tool for defending against potential Soviet aggression. This circular history, American rifles arming German soldiers to oppose Russian forces, illustrated both the rifle's enduring utility and the strange ironies of 20th century geopolitics. In the immediate aftermath of World War II, as soldiers returned home and the nation turned toward peace, military planners began assessing what had worked and what hadn't. The M1 Garand topped every list of successful equipment. Lieutenant General Simon Bolivar Buckner, who commanded 10th Army during the Okinawa Campaign before being killed by Japanese artillery on June 18, 1945, had written shortly before his death, "The M1 rifle represents the finest individual weapon any army has ever fielded. Future wars will be won by nations that can equip their forces with similar or superior weapons." Former German military leaders, interviewed after the war, grudgingly acknowledged the Garand's effectiveness. General der Infanterie Günther Blumentritt, who served as Chief of Staff to Field Marshal Gerhard von Rundstedt, stated in 1945, "The American semi-automatic rifle was a considerable surprise to us. Our intelligence had not adequately reported its capabilities. When our troops encountered Americans equipped with these weapons, they found themselves outgunned at the individual level. This forced tactical adjustments we were not prepared to make." The rifle continued serving American forces through the Korean War, where it performed admirably in conditions ranging from the brutal cold of the Chosin Reservoir in December 1950, where temperatures dropped to negative 35 degrees Fahrenheit, to the summer heat of the 1953 fighting. Marine Colonel Louis Chesty Puller, one of the most decorated Marines in history, carried an M1 Garand during the Chosin Reservoir breakout. His regiment, the 1st Marines, fought through 7 Chinese divisions to escape encirclement. Puller later said, "The Garand saved the 1st Marine Division at Chosin. In those temperatures, in that terrain, against those numbers, we needed every advantage we could get. That rifle worked when nothing else did." By 1957, the M14 officially replaced the M1 Garand as the standard U.S. military rifle, though many Reserve and National Guard units continued using Garands into the 1970s. The M1A1 Garand saw limited service in the early years of the Vietnam War, and Navy personnel used Garands well into the 1960s. When production finally ended after 2 decades, over 6.5 million M1 Garands had been manufactured, a production run that stands among the most successful in firearms history. John Garand himself retired from Springfield Armory in 1953 at age 65, having spent 34 years transforming American infantry capabilities. He remained in Springfield, Massachusetts, visiting the armory regularly and consulting on various projects. He passed away on February 16, 1974, at age 86, and is interred in Hillcrest Park Cemetery in Springfield. In 1973, 1 year before his death, he was inducted into the U.S. Army Ordnance Corps Hall of Fame. The citation reads, "Due to his initiative and instinctive inventive genius, the U.S. soldier possessed a firepower advantage during World War II. His rifle, the Garand, changed the nature of infantry combat." The rifle's legacy persists in unexpected ways. Military drill teams and honor guards still use M1 Garands in ceremonies. The rifle's weight and solid construction making it ideal for precision drill. The distinctive sound of a Garand's operating rod and the ping of its ejecting clip remain instantly recognizable to veterans and history enthusiasts. The Civilian Marksmanship Program, established by Congress to promote firearms safety training and marksmanship, has distributed hundreds of thousands of surplus M1 Garands to American citizens, ensuring that new generations can experience this historic weapon. But perhaps the truest measure of the M1 Garand's legacy lies in the simple fact that it worked. In an era when weapons designers pursued complex, innovative solutions, some brilliant, some disastrous, John Garand created a rifle that balanced sophistication with reliability, power with usability, innovation with practicality. It wasn't perfect. The en bloc clip system, while effective, limited soldiers to 8 rounds. The rifle's weight, at nearly 10 pounds unloaded, made it heavier than some alternatives. The distinctive ejection ping, while probably not as tactically significant as wartime rumors suggested, did advertise when a rifle was empty. These flaws were minor compared to the rifle's revolutionary impact. The M1 Garand transformed infantry combat by demonstrating that semi-automatic fire could be reliable, accurate, and mass-produced. It gave individual soldiers firepower that previously required entire squads. It allowed American forces to fight outnumbered and win, to assault fortified positions and succeed, to defend against overwhelming odds and survive. The German soldiers who survived encounters with American riflemen never forgot the experience. Klaus Müller, the Obergefreiter, who watched one M1 Garand clip destroy his squad in the Ardennes Forest in December 1944, survived the war and eventually immigrated to the United States in 1953. In a 1985 interview for a military history project, he reflected, "That morning changed my understanding of war. I had thought bravery and training were enough, but the Americans had a better rifle. That sounds simple, but it wasn't. A better rifle means you can fire faster, stay on target, keep the enemy suppressed while your comrades move. A better rifle means the difference between living and dying. The M1 Garand was a better rifle. We learned that lesson at terrible cost." The numbers tell part of the story. 5.4 million rifles produced during World War II. Over 400 million rounds fired in combat. Weapons that functioned in temperatures from -40 to positive 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Rifles that worked when caked with sand, mud, snow, or coral dust. Individual soldiers who fired 40 to 50 aimed shots per minute compared to 15 to 20 from bolt-action rifles. These statistics quantify capability, but they don't capture meaning. The meaning emerges in thousands of individual stories. Soldiers who survived because they could fire one more shot faster. Positions held because defenders could maintain volume of fire. Assaults that succeeded because attackers could suppress defenders while advancing. The M1 Garand didn't win World War II, no single weapon could, but it gave American soldiers an advantage that, multiplied across millions of individual firefights, contributed materially to Allied victory. As the sun set on the 20th century, veterans gathered to remember their service. They recalled friends lost, battles won, horrors witnessed, and many of them remembered the weight of an M1 Garand, the smooth action of its gas-operated system, the reliable certainty that when they pulled the trigger, the rifle would fire. In a war defined by industrial-scale violence and mechanized destruction, where individual soldiers could feel powerless against the forces arrayed around them, the M1 Garand provided something precious: control, the ability to affect their fate, a fighting chance. That, more than any technical specification or production number, defines the legacy of John Garand's greatest creation. It was, as General Patton said, the greatest battle implement ever devised, not because it was flawless, but because when soldiers needed it most, it worked. And in war, that's all that matters.